So, you taught at UVA and lived through Charlottesville in 2017. Can you tell me what Charlottesville was? What did it mean?
It's really interesting because the day just before that, I did a long interview with Katie Couric, who was working on a documentary about Confederate monuments, and she
Mhm.
and I spent 2 hours talking, walking around the UVA campus, talking about the Confederate monuments were there. She was a student at UVA.
Mm.
She said, "I didn't even know these were here." I said, "Well, most people don't know they're here. They're not aware of this part of the landscape." We had no idea. Her film crew went out the next day and filmed what was going on when they actually had the violence and the crowd at the Lee statue, which was downtown. I didn't go down to watch any of that.
What's your view on Confederate monuments? The monuments that capture these periods, these complicated periods of our history.
Well, I have complicated views, but my first reaction to that is they're not all the same. They're treated as if they're all exactly the same, and they're not. There are the Silent Sam, which was on the campus at UNC for years. It had some of the rhetoric when they dedicated that is really horrific. It's horrible rhetoric, and I can understand why that needed to go. There's what was called the Battle of Liberty Place monument in New Orleans that was a white supremacist monument, very definitely that. I think that local places should decide these. Wherever the monument is, I think that's who should decide if the local, and I think there should be a process how they decide it. Let people have a public hearing, but they did that in Charlottesville, actually, had a public hearing. I went and talked at it. Lots of other scholars and local people talked at it. And then they had a commission that they had set up, and the commission voted to keep the monuments in place, but examine them with text that put them in context, and then put up new monuments to previously ignored groups. The city council then came in and overrode that and decided they took them all down in Charlottesville. They also took down the Lewis and Clark monument, and they took down all the monuments that had been put up. I think many of the Confederate monuments, the kind of ones on courthouse lawns and so forth, that were put up by the Confederate generation, that is, the veterans themselves and the women who were alive during the war, tend to be monuments to the common soldiers that this kind of lost generation of young men. The later wave of monuments that came were put up by other groups they're not really Confederate monuments. They're put up by the ones that were put up in the 20s and 30s. A third wave were put up in reaction to the civil rights activities in the 50s and early 60s. And then a fourth wave went up after the movie Gettysburg and Ken Burns' series. But they're complicated, and I see them as historical. And I understand the arguments on both sides. I understand people who just say they're hateful. They bring up hateful remembrances. We should get rid of all of them, every one of them. I used them as teaching tools in Charlottesville for years with groups of teachers and students. There were 5 monuments in Charlottesville, 2 that were put up by veterans, 2 that were put up by groups later. The Lee and Jackson statues were those. And then there were 2 bronze plates on the side of the rotunda that just listed UVA graduates who died in Confederate service. They had about 500 names on them. Those were all of the Confederate statues there. And I used them to talk about different strains of memory and used the main tenor at the Lee statue when it went up was this reconciliationist Lee. Lee wanted the nation back together. Lee at Appomattox, that kind of stuff. Didn't have anything to do with Jim Crow or white supremacy, although all the people who put him up probably would have, clearly, we would consider them racist. They were in favor of white supremacy. But you don't need statues in the post-war South and the Jim Crow South. You have the police force, state law, local law, state troopers. That's what enforces white supremacy, not statues. The historian in me likes to use them as part of the historical record, interpret them, use them to explain different parts of U.S. history. That's how I use them. Having said all that, I did and still do believe that it should be a local issue. If a locality decides they don't want them up anymore, then don't have them up anymore.
I think if we ignore history, we're gonna be doomed to repeat it. I think that's we should never censor books. We should read books. We should read Mein Kampf. We should read books that capture a certain moment in history, even if it's a hateful moment in history, even if it's a destructive moment in history. We need to understand.
Or have them read texts written at the time that have language that we wouldn't use now. It helps you understand the time.
Yeah.
There are a lot of hard edges in the past. There are a lot of nice edges too that make you feel good, but there are a lot of really hard edges in the past. And if you're going to be serious about coming to terms with history, you need to accept that and deal with them and talk about them and not just try to erase them, I think. There are a lot of books that people won't read now. I taught a graduate seminar at one point on foundational 19th century texts, and one of the texts I was going to that I assigned in the class was Huckleberry Finn. And a lot of the students said they wouldn't read Huckleberry Finn because they knew it had language in it that they didn't want to see those words.
Even just reading about slavery, American and otherwise, is hard. It's really difficult, but like we're capable of that. We humans are capable of that. And it doesn't somehow go away because we agree for it to go away. We're always can return back to that, maybe in other forms, in other ways. We can do evil things onto each other. And I personally believe all of us are capable of doing evil things onto each other. And the dark reality of that is we too readily convince ourselves that we're doing good.
Yeah, because if you're doing good, you can do anything,
You
and
can
it's
do anything.
justified if it's good.
Yeah.
If the end is good,
Yeah.
all bets are off. You can do anything that you want to do.
And reading history to realize that we need to think deeper and more critically about our actions, and also that history is complicated and there's a bunch of different forces, is really important. And also to realize that individuals can turn the tides of history, can lead to progress, can stop evil doing when it's happening. All those things, like the power of the individual is immense.
Yes, I mean, coming back to the monuments for a minute, it's also worth talking about that even at the time there were people a lot of Union veterans were against putting up Confederate monuments. Frederick Douglass had a problem with the Emancipation Monument that was in Emancipation Park on Capitol Hill and talked about the reasons why he had why is this the image that you chose for that monument? Union veterans, they had a hard time with Confederate monuments, and I just think that it is almost everything can be a teaching tool, but it bothers me that certain books would be proscribed because they have some language that might bother somebody, you need to. I mean, the language should bother you.
Yeah,
So
I think history truly should bother you. It should be difficult. It should be a painful process to study human history, because if it's not painful, you're not really understanding the full range of what we're capable of.